Hey everybody, so this video is about operations on rational numbers. We're going to quickly review the rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing positive and negative numbers, but we'll spend most of our time on how to perform those same operations on fractions. Okay, so adding and subtracting, when you have positive and negative numbers, there's definitely some rules that you can memorize, but I think that it's much easier if you just kind of focus on how the numbers really balance out. So if I had negative $3, which might mean that maybe I owed somebody $3, maybe they bought my lunch or something, and then maybe you found $5, okay, so we're going to add to that, we have a positive $5. When you pay that person back, what are you going to be left with? So when you kind of balance everything out, you would be left with $2. So even though this is an addition problem because I owed $3, I had to take that away, so it kind of turns subtraction. Okay, then we have 9 minus 15. So it's kind of think of the same thing. Let's say that you, in your checking account, you have $9 to the positive. Okay, but then you kind of forget that you're running low on money and you go to Walmart and you spend $15. Whoops. You spend $15. So maybe the bank pays that, but then they say you owe us. You now owe us $6. So we would say you owe, or we have negative $6. Okay, kind of the same concept here for the next one. You owe somebody $7, and then somebody else, you have to owe somebody else $6. Together, total, you are owing, in this case, $13. So still negative $13. Or we would just say negative 13. Okay. Now the next problem is a little bit tricky because you're subtracting a negative. When the definition of subtraction is adding the opposite. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to kind of connect those lines. You can kind of see that these two negatives come together to make a positive. Two negatives make a positive in this case. So when you see minus a negative, we're really just adding there. So I'm going to rewrite this problem as negative 4 plus 3. So again, you owe somebody $4. You find $3 on the sidewalk. You pay them back, or you're still going to have to owe them $1. So negative 1. Okay, and then this last one we're adding. But because they're both negative, so we owe somebody $19, we owe somebody else $5, so all together we are in the hole $24. Okay. Multiplication and division, these rules work the same for both operations. Make sure you have this part in your notes. If you have two negatives multiplying, you get a positive out of that. You divide two negatives, you get a positive. If you multiply two positives, you get a positive. If you divide two positives, you have a positive. What you might notice that all of these have in common, right? They are all positives. And how we get positives is, if you notice this, we have two of the same thing, that we are multiplying or dividing. So if you have the same signs, both positive or both negative, multiplying or dividing, you are going to get positives out of that. Okay, what about if they're different? So you notice on each of these, if I have a positive and negative, the order doesn't matter. You have one positive, you have one negative, and you are multiplying or dividing those, you are going to get a negative. And I wrote all those twice, not sure why. Okay, so if they are different signs, you get negatives. Same signs, you get positives. Alright, now let's get to the fun stuff. Fractions. So we'll keep the first one simple here. We will have like denominators. So denominator is the number on the bottom of the fraction. We're going to say 1/2, oops, plus 3 halves. Pretend that's a 2. Alright, when I'm adding these together, I want you to think of what you actually have here is half of something. So let's say maybe it's a piece of pizza. Alright, so we have just the half. Here we have 3 of those halves. So I'm going to draw just the halves this time. And you have 3 of those. So if I added all of those halves together, which I can do because they're all the same, they're all just halves, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So 1 plus 3 is 4. So 4 halves. You always want to simplify your answers if you can. In this case, I have 4 halves, or 4 divided by 2, which would just be 2. Okay, unlike denominators, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Let's add together 1/2 and 1/3. So just to give you kind of a visual here, talking about pizza again, we just have half of a pizza. So 1/2 of the pizza. Here we have a third. So if I'd split that pizza up into thirds, I'm talking about just one of those thirds. Now I can't add these together like I did before because they're different sizes. I can't say that I have 2 of one of them. I can't say that I have 2 halves or 2 thirds because I don't. I have a half and I have a third. I can't add them together because they're not the same thing. So we have to fix that. So what we're going to do is we are going to kind of split these pieces up even more so that I know how much I'm actually talking about. So what I'm going to do for the third is I'm going to divide all of those thirds in half. So just each of those big large pieces, we're going to cut those up again. And I'm going to do something similar to the half. I'm going to split the half up into thirds. So now my 2 pizzas look the same. I have 6 slices in each pizza. So I can identify now how many of those 6 that I have. The 1/2 I have colored in 3 of these 6s. And the 1/3 I only colored in 2 of the 6. So of those 6 pieces I had 2 of them. For 1/3, and for the 1/2, I have 3 of those 6 of those slices that there's 6 of. So now I have common denominators, so I can go ahead and add those tops together, the numerators together. 3 plus 2 is 5, 5, 6. So a couple things I want to point out about this before we move on to multiplication. 1/2 has the same value as 3, 6. If I simplified 3, 6, I would get 1/2. The 1/3 has the same value as 2, 6. If I simplified 2, 6, I would get 1/3. So I didn't change the value of the numbers here. I just kind of rewrote the way that they looked. All right, let's do another one kind of like this because I want to show you how to do it without having to draw pizzas. Okay, so I'm going to do the same problem, just without the pizzas. Okay, I switched the order there, but okay, so 1/3 and 1/2. So when I'm trying to get those common denominators without having to draw a bunch of circles, I want to think about what their their least common multiple is. So if I listed all the multiples of 3, which would be 3, 6, 9, 12. If I listed all of those numbers, and I did the same thing for 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If I listed all of those, I want the smallest one that would show up in both lists. So, 3, 6, 9, 12, and over here I would have 2, 4, 6, 8. So the multiples there, the smallest one that they both have is 6. And so that's another way to find that common denominator. A lot of you should be able to do that in your head. You could just kind of say, I know that the LCM, or least common multiple, is 6. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to get the numerators. So once I figured out that my denominator is 6, I want to say whatever I do to the bottom of this fraction, I need to do to the top. So 3, what did I do to make it a 6? I times it by 2. So I need to do the same thing to the 1. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so likewise over here, what did I do to the 2 to make it a 6? Multiplied by 3. So I want to do the same thing to the 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. Just like before then, add the numerators and you get 5, 6. We'll get plenty of practice on that because I know that that can be confusing. There's a lot of steps to adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Okay, multiplying and dividing, usually harder, but in this case, it's actually a whole lot easier. So let's say 2/3 times 1/5. With multiplication, all that you have to do is multiply straight across. Multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. That is it. Pretty easy, right? Division is almost as easy, but there's a few things that you have to do first. So let's say 1/3 divided by 2/5. Okay, so here's what you're going to remember. Keep it, change it, flip it. So what I mean by that is the first fraction, you keep it the same. Change the division to multiplication and flip the second fraction. And then we can treat it like multiplication and multiply straight across. 1 times 5 is 5. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so there's all the rules for operations on rational numbers. I hope that you found this helpful. Good luck.